I'm writing this from my back porch, drinking coffee, watching the moving truck pull away from my neighbor's house for the last time, and I've never felt more satisfied in my entire life. This has been a 2-year war, and I finally won. Buckle up, because this story is absolutely wild. My name is Jessica, I'm 36 years old, and I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Austin, Texas. I'm a graphic designer who works from home. I have 2 rescue dogs, a golden retriever named Buddy and a mixed breed named Pepper, and up until 2 years ago, I thought I'd found my forever home. 3 bedrooms, nice yard, great neighbors, close to downtown but quiet. It was perfect. Then Patricia moved in next door. Let me paint you a picture of Patricia. She's 62 years old, recently divorced, no kids, and has apparently dedicated her entire existence to making other people miserable. I'm talking about the kind of person who calls the HOA if your trash can is visible from the street for more than 2 hours after pickup. The kind of person who measures your grass with a ruler to see if it's a 1/4 inch too long. The kind of person who, well, you'll see. Patricia moved in on a Saturday in June 2 years ago. I actually went over with a welcome basket, homemade cookies, a nice candle, a card with my number in case she needed anything. I'm a good neighbor. I believe in community. She opened the door, looked at the basket, looked at me, and said, "I'm allergic to dogs. You need to keep your animals away from my property line." No hello. No thank you. Just immediate hostility. "Oh, okay," I said, trying to stay friendly. "They're actually pretty good about staying in our yard, but I'll make sure they don't bother you." "See that you do." She took the basket and closed the door in my face. I should have known right then that this was going to be a problem. The first incident happened 3 days later. I was in my backyard with Buddy and Pepper, throwing a tennis ball around. My yard is fenced, they were well within my property line, just playing and having fun. Patricia came storming out of her house. "Your dogs are too loud. It's disturbing my peace." It was 2 p.m. on a Wednesday. They were barking occasionally when they caught the ball, normal dog behavior. "I'm sorry, but it's the middle of the day. They're just playing. I don't care what time it is. Control your animals or I'll call the police." She actually said that. Over dogs playing in their own yard in the middle of the afternoon. I tried to be reasonable. I brought the dogs inside a little earlier than usual, even though it annoyed me. I wanted to keep the peace. 2 days later, there was a knock on my door. It was the police. "Ma'am, we got a noise complaint about dogs barking." I was stunned. "Are you serious? It's 3 in the afternoon, and my dogs were in the backyard playing for maybe 20 minutes. The officer looked uncomfortable. "We have to respond to all calls. Your neighbor said the dogs have been barking non-stop for hours." "That's completely untrue. Come inside, you can see them. They're sleeping on the couch." The officer came in, saw my dogs peacefully napping, and sighed. "Look, between you and me, this seems like a neighbor dispute more than an actual noise issue. But if we keep getting calls, we have to keep responding. Maybe try to work it out with your neighbor." I promised I would try, and the officer left. I went over to Patricia's house to talk to her. This time, I was less friendly. "Patricia, you called the cops on my dogs for playing in the yard. That's ridiculous. Your animals are a nuisance. If you can't control them, you shouldn't have them. They're dogs. They bark sometimes. That's what dogs do. Not in a civilized neighborhood." She started to close the door. "If you call the police on me again for something frivolous, we're going to have a problem." She smiled. Actually smiled. "I'll call the police whenever I feel it's necessary. Have a nice day, Jessica." That was the beginning of the war. Over the next 3 months, Patricia called the police on me 17 times. 17. I kept a log because it got so absurd. Called 4, dogs barking, 6 times, music too loud, 3 times, even though I barely ever played music, suspicious activity when I had friends over for a barbecue, car parked illegally in my own driveway, possible drug activity when a friend came over to smoke a cigarette on my porch, and my personal favorite, possible prostitution because I had a male friend's car in my driveway overnight. Every single call was bullshit. Every single one. The police started getting annoyed with both of us, her for calling constantly, me for causing problems even though I literally wasn't doing anything wrong. One officer told me, "Ma'am, I sympathize, but there's not much we can do. She has the right to call, and we have to respond. Document everything and consider legal action if it continues. I started documenting everything. Every call, every interaction, everything. Patricia also started calling our HOA. Our neighborhood has a pretty laid-back HOA, mostly just dealing with major issues and organizing the annual block party. But Patricia weaponized them. She reported me for trash cans visible from street. I'd forgotten to bring them in by the deadline once. Grass being too long, it was maybe half an inch over the limit. I'd been sick. Unapproved Christmas decorations, they were completely normal, she just didn't like them. Car parked on street overnight, which is allowed, she just made up that it wasn't. Excessive outdoor lighting, I have normal porch lights. Paint color on my front door, it was within HOA guidelines, she claimed it wasn't. The HOA president, a nice guy named Tom, actually called me to apologize. Jessica, I'm sorry. Patricia has been challenging. We've explained that most of her complaints aren't valid, but she keeps calling and emailing. Just ignore her as best you can. But it was hard to ignore her when she was making my life hell. She'd stand at the property line and record me with her phone whenever I was outside. She'd yell at my friends when they visited. She'd glare at me every time I left my house. She'd make passive-aggressive comments about people who don't respect their neighbors. My stress levels were through the roof. I started having anxiety about going into my own yard. I couldn't enjoy my home anymore. And there was nothing I could legally do because she wasn't technically breaking any laws, she was just being a nightmare. Then things escalated. I came home from running errands one day to find my fence had been vandalized. Someone had spray-painted "Dog Killer" across 3 panels in huge red letters. I called the police. They came out, filed a report, but there was no evidence of who did it. I suspected Patricia, but I couldn't prove it. The police said unless I had video evidence or witnesses, there wasn't much they could do. That's when I installed security cameras. Front door, backyard, side of the house, everywhere. If Patricia was going to keep harassing me, I was going to have proof. The cameras were the best decision I ever made. 2 weeks later, I caught Patricia on camera sneaking into my yard at 6 a.m. and letting my dogs out through the side gate. She just opened the gate and walked away, hoping they'd run off. Fortunately, Buddy and Pepper are well trained and they just wandered back to the door wanting to come inside. But the intent was clear, she was trying to get rid of my dogs. I had video evidence of her trespassing and endangering my animals. I took it straight to the police. This time, they took it seriously. Patricia was charged with criminal trespass and animal endangerment. Not huge charges, but enough to get her attention. She had to go to court. She claimed she was checking to make sure the animals were okay because she'd heard them crying. The video clearly showed the dogs sleeping peacefully before she showed up, and showed her deliberately opening the gate and leaving. The judge didn't buy her story. She got a fine and was issued a restraining order. She couldn't come within 50 feet of my property or contact me directly. I thought that would be the end of it. I was so naive. Patricia started finding creative ways to continue her harassment while technically staying within the restraining order. She'd have friends call the police on her behalf. She'd file complaints with the city about code violations at my house. She'd send letters to the HOA, not directly to me, so not violating the restraining order, making up problems. I was exhausted. This woman had become my entire life. I couldn't relax, couldn't enjoy my home, couldn't just exist without worrying what she'd do next. My boyfriend at the time told me I should just move. She's not worth this stress. Just sell the house and find somewhere else. We broke up over that, actually. I refused to let some entitled asshole force me out of my home. I'd done nothing wrong, and I wasn't going to reward her behavior by leaving. That's when I decided to go on offense instead of defense. I started researching Patricia. If she was going to make my life her hobby, I was going to learn everything about her. Turns out, Patricia had moved to Austin after a messy divorce in Dallas. Her ex-husband had gotten the house in the settlement, and she'd used her portion to buy the house next to me. She was on a fixed income from the settlement and Social Security. She had no job, no hobbies except apparently tormenting me, and based on some online searching, she had a history of neighbor disputes at her previous address too. But more importantly, I noticed something interesting when I looked at public records for her house. Her house had been built in 1985, and according to the records, there had been no major permits pulled for renovations since 1992. That seemed odd. I'd seen contractors at her house several times in the months since she moved in. Lots of work being done. But no permits on file. In Austin, and most places, you need permits for major work: electrical, plumbing, structural changes, anything significant. No permits meant either the work was minor and didn't require them, or someone was doing unpermitted work. I had a hunch it was the latter. I did what Patricia had been doing to me: I reported her to the city. I filed a complaint about possible unpermitted construction work at her address. The city sent an inspector. And oh boy, did they find problems. Patricia had done major work on her house without permits. She'd knocked down a load-bearing wall between the kitchen and living room without proper support. She'd rewired electrical outlets herself and nothing was up to code. She'd had someone install a new water heater without permits or proper installation. The inspector found dozens of code violations. The city issued her a stop work order and told her she needed to bring everything up to code, get proper permits for the work that had been done, and pay substantial fines. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars in required fixes and fines. Patricia tried to fight it, but the evidence was clear. She'd done major unpermitted work, and now she had to fix it properly. But here's where it gets better. Because the work had been done improperly and without permits, her homeowner's insurance found out. They did an inspection and determined that her house was no longer insurable in its current state: too many safety violations. Without insurance, she couldn't keep her mortgage. The bank required proof of insurance, and when she couldn't provide it, they started foreclosure proceedings. Patricia tried to get the work fixed quickly to get insurance reinstated, but she didn't have the money. Remember, she was on a fixed income. She'd already spent most of her liquid assets on the initial renovations. She tried to take out a home equity loan to pay for the fixes, but the bank wouldn't approve it because of the code violations and ongoing foreclosure. She was trapped. She couldn't afford to fix the house, couldn't get insurance, couldn't keep the mortgage, and couldn't sell the house in its current condition because no buyer could get financing for a house with major code violations. Meanwhile, I was documenting every interaction, every time she violated the restraining order, through proxies, every false complaint she filed. I'd compiled a massive dossier of her harassment. I took all of it to a lawyer and filed a civil suit against her for harassment, emotional distress, and the cost of the vandalism repairs to my fence. My lawyer looked at the evidence and said, "This is one of the most clear-cut harassment cases I've ever seen." Patricia tried to countersue, claiming I was harassing her by reporting her code violations. Her lawyer literally laughed at her and dropped her as a client. She ended up representing herself in court, which went about as well as you'd expect. The judge reviewed all my evidence: police reports, HOA complaints, video footage, everything. Then he reviewed her defenses, which basically amounted to Jessica is a bad neighbor and her dogs are too loud. The judge ruled in my favor. Patricia was ordered to pay me $15,000 in damages plus my legal fees. She was also issued a permanent restraining order: she couldn't come within 100 feet of me or my property ever again. $15,000 she didn't have because she'd already spent everything trying to fix her code violations. The foreclosure proceeded. Patricia declared bankruptcy. Her house went up for auction. And here's the beautiful karma of it all: I bought it. Well, technically my friend bought it. I couldn't buy it myself because of the restraining order and the legal issues, but my friend Rebecca had been looking for an investment property. She bought Patricia's house at auction for way below market value, because of all the code violations and needed repairs, and she's fixing it up properly now. Patricia had to move out last month. She found a small apartment about 15 miles away. I know this because she had to provide her new address to the court as part of the bankruptcy proceedings. The moving truck just left about an hour ago. I watched from my porch, drinking my coffee, with Buddy and Pepper lying at my feet. Patricia saw me as they were loading the last boxes. She just stared at me, and I swear I could see the moment she realized exactly how badly she'd screwed herself. She'd moved in next to me 2 years ago, and through her own actions calling the cops constantly, harassing me, vandalizing my property, doing illegal renovations, she'd lost her house, declared bankruptcy, and had to move away in shame. And I hadn't even been trying to destroy her. I'd just defended myself and reported legitimate code violations. Rebecca is going to rent the house once the renovations are done. She's already told me she's going to screen tenants carefully to make sure we get good neighbors this time. So that's the story of how my nightmare Karen neighbor called the cops on me 47 times, yes, 47 times total I counted, tried to get my dogs taken away, vandalized my property, and ended up losing everything through her own entitled behavior. Do I feel bad? A little. I'm not a monster. Watching someone lose their home is never fun, even when they brought it on themselves. But mostly, I feel relief. Sweet, beautiful relief. I can use my own backyard again without being recorded. I can have friends over without worrying about false police reports. I can live in my own home without constant anxiety about what my neighbor will do next. And there's definitely a part of me that feels satisfaction. Patricia thought she could bully me out of my home. She thought she was untouchable because she knew how to weaponize the system, calling cops, filing complaints, making my life hell while technically staying within the law. But she forgot that two can play that game. And when I finally played back, I was better at it than she was. The police know my name now. But in a good way. The responding officers have told me they're glad the situation is resolved and they're sorry I had to deal with that for 2 years. The HOA president sent me a bottle of wine with a card that said thank you for your patience. Apparently Patricia had been calling them almost daily toward the end. My neighbors, my actual nice neighbors, have told me they're relieved she's gone. Turns out she'd been bothering other people too, just not to the extent she'd focused on me. One neighbor said Patricia had complained about their kid playing basketball in their own driveway because the sound of the ball bouncing was disruptive. I've learned a lot through this experience. Document everything. Seriously, everything. I had 2 years of documentation that made my legal case ironclad. Security cameras are worth their weight in gold. That footage of Patricia letting my dogs out was game-changing. Know your local laws and codes. I never would have thought to check for unpermitted work if I hadn't been researching ways to defend myself. Don't let bullies force you out of your home. I almost gave up so many times, but I'm glad I didn't. Sometimes karma needs a little push. Patricia's downfall was her own doing, but I definitely helped accelerate it. The system can be weaponized against you, but it can also be used to protect you. Know your rights and use them. Not all neighbors are created equal. Protect the good ones and document the bad ones. People have asked me if I feel like I went too far. Like maybe reporting her code violations was petty or vindictive. Here's my take: those code violations were real and dangerous. A load-bearing wall removed improperly could have caused her house to collapse. Improper electrical work could have caused a fire that spread to my house. Bad plumbing could have caused water damage that affected my property. I didn't make up the violations. I just reported legitimate safety issues. If she'd done the work properly and gotten permits like you're supposed to, none of this would have happened. She chose to cut corners and break the law, just like she chose to harass me for 2 years. I just chose to stop being a victim and start protecting myself. Was I gleeful about her downfall? Maybe a little. Is that petty? Probably. Do I care? Not really. After 2 years of hell, watching her moving truck drive away felt like the end of the longest nightmare of my life. I'm planning a barbecue next weekend. Big one, all my neighbors invited, except Patricia, obviously. We're going to celebrate good riddance with burgers, beer, and probably some very cathartic toasts. Buddy and Pepper can bark all they want in the backyard without me worrying about police showing up. I can paint my front door whatever color I want, within HOA guidelines. I can have overnight guests without being accused of running a brothel. I can just live in peace. In my own home. Like I should have been able to from the beginning. And if Rebecca's future tenant ever has an issue with me, well, I've got 2 years of experience dealing with difficult neighbors now. But somehow, I don't think that's going to be a problem. Patricia taught me a valuable lesson: don't start a war you can't win. She thought she could break me down with constant harassment and false reports. She thought I'd eventually give up and move away. She was wrong. And now she's the one who moved away, bankrupt and defeated, while I'm sitting on my porch drinking coffee and enjoying my peaceful neighborhood. Game, set, match.